wife worked with Charlie, school board. Of course, he didn't have anything negative whatsoever to say about Charlie. I spoke to Brigadier General Trey County. He retired. We had a very long conversation. Kind of chased some rabbits there for a little bit, but he was Charlie worked under Mr. Zant worked under him on the National Guard and different positions and stuff. How recommended him that he could do just about anything except with that, the two references getting high regards. So.
Okay. Ready to have Mr. Vincent come in? Good afternoon.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. How's everybody?
Wonderful. How about yourself?
Not too shabby.
I hope you had a nice New Year's and Christmas.
I did.
Yeah?
I did. It
Awesome.
was a little odd at the Van Zant house. First year, boy number one was on shift as a firefighter Christmas Day, so he's 20. We don't do the Santa Claus thing that much anymore.
Not much
Suggested maybe
anymore.
we go down and let him open his gifts in front of his comrades, but he wasn't into that either.
Well, I want to say welcome, and we appreciate you applying for this position. I know you know everybody, right? We all know each other, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I've just known you as a neighbor briefly, and then, of course, being with the Airport Authority and all that. Can you just kind of give us a little background about yourself and, just kind of update so we're all on the same page?
How long do I have?
2 hours. Yeah. But we do have a bunch of questions.
So, we moved to Keystone Heights in 1981, my family did. We'd come down a few times before that for vacations. My grandparents have owned homes on Brooklyn, Geneva, Santa Fe. They're long gone now. But we all kind of just fell in love with the place. So I went through the elementary school, the high school, was into everything in high school, enjoyed it. There wasn't an internet back then. My dad gave me two options. I could join the military like my brother and his brother, or I could go to University of Florida. So I opted to do both. I joined the Florida National Guard and went to the University of Florida. While I was at the University of Florida, I met my wife, Stephanie. We found our second month of being together. I brought her out here and had to show her where we were going to raise children if this thing got serious. And here we are, having done that and raised them in this city and live over on Lake Brooklyn now. Throughout that, the last 3 decades, I've served in the National Guard, retiring in 2022 as a helicopter pilot. I've flown in all the restricted airspace that abuts your airport, landed, bought fuel there, done those kinds of things militarily, worked on Camp Landing, Cecil Field. Governmental, political-wise, served on the Clay County School Board, served as Clay County School Superintendent. Similar to how this relationship would be if it moves forward, working for 5 elected members, producing budgets, agendas, all those types of things, but a totally different desired set of outcomes for a city council versus a school district, right? But that's what I've done the last year and a half or so. I've been kind of looking around thinking about what I should do next, and that brings us to here today.
Okay. So we have we've created some questions that Ms. Silva's going to pose. She's our new city clerk. I don't know if you met Stephanie yet. Just did, yeah. So she's going to ask the questions, and then we'll go through a scoring process.
Okay.
Why do you want to work for the city of Keystone Heights as the city manager?
This is my hometown. I'm really good in a crisis. Sometimes you need that most of the operations is what I've grown more fond of through the years versus the legislative process, being a member of a legislative body like yourselves. I have one son still in high school here. He graduates this year. I like the connectedness. I would not describe myself as over-controlling, but I believe things that are worth doing well. I trust myself to do that better for the city of Keystone Heights than I would anybody else. Had never contemplated this job until a couple months ago. I called the current city manager asking about something for the airport, and she just happened to mention she had given notice, and had I ever thought about being a city manager, and that really got me thinking about it. I have probably called each and every one of you just to think it's a good idea. If you think it is, great, evaluate me. Your charter calls for you to hire a city manager solely on the basis of their administrative and executive experience. So if I'm the one out of the 3 you're interviewing today with the most of that that's relevant, then great. And if I'm not, follow your charter and pick the right person.
What can you bring to the citizens, taxpayers, if you become the city manager?
Everything that you would need a city manager to do according to your charter, to your job description, I'm able to do. I studied in my master's degree, which is in organizational leadership, particularly servant leadership. And in servant leadership, one of the key tenets, as an author named Greenleaf writes, is listening, empathy, things like that. And a lot of times, the citizens that will walk through that door on any given day, either happy or upset about something, need to be heard. Now, can the city government meet everything that everybody wants them to do? Absolutely not. But can we listen intently and try to offer some solution? Yes, we should and we can. They won't find anybody that cares about the city of Keystone Heights or this community more than me. That I won't be outworked. You won't ever have to come in wondering if you need to help me do my job. I might need guidance to clarify your vision, your purpose in something. I might give advice, and after I've given it, and you guys have made a decision as a collective body, then you and the citizens of Keystone Heights can expect me to execute that with fidelity all the way till it's complete, or I have to come back and ask for more resources, or whether that be time, money. Another governmental agency is weighing in on this, so we're going to have to go talk with them and let them go through their discussion and see where we fit into the process. Things like that.
Have you reviewed the city of Keystone Heights ordinances?
Yes.
Are you a notary?
I'm not a notary. I'm not unwilling to become one. I know several notaries. It's never an issue around here for me to get something notarized.
Do you have a copy of the Government in the Sunshine Manual and use it for reference from time to time?
I've used it for reference many, many times. I don't know that I have a printed copy anymore. It gets updated. Every time the legislature gets together, they tweak things. But I've operated under it for more than 20 years now, so I'm very comfortable and aware of it.
How would you avoid violating the Sunshine Law when discussing or otherwise communicating with the city council members about pending matters that could potentially be voted on by the council?
Well, that's really simple. You don't congregate with any two of them and talk about city business. If we all wanted to go have breakfast together, great, but we don't talk about something that could plausibly be voted on. Or run into Mr. Hart in the gym or something, he and I want to have a discussion. That's nothing wrong with that. You know, any of you are free to call me or instruct me to meet up with you or come in here and us hash that out one-on-one, whatever those issues are.
If I might, Mr. Van Zant, that was my question, and it goes to the conduit concept. of not passing on what some other council person has said when you're in a
Yeah.
private situation.
I've had, as an elected board member of 5, I had a gentleman at a certain time, and he liked to say things that were probably a little outside the intent of the Sunshine Law, and I'd be like, no, that's not what I'm asking. You tell me why this is good or bad for Clay County. Don't tell me if you think we can get it passed because we already got 2 votes, and if I'll do it, everybody will do it. I don't play like that. I retired from the military as a lieutenant colonel. I've been to all kinds of schools, but in the military, but ethics are huge. I included a couple of my evaluations that you actually get evaluated on that, on your Army values, which are, are loyalty, duty, respect, the acronym leadership, straight down, service, honor, integrity, personal courage. So if I violate those, then I can't look myself in the mirror, so I just don't. It's a lot easier that way.
Have you had any formal training in computer programs such as Microsoft Office, QuickBooks, Canva, or has your training been on the job?
Well, I have had several classes. I'm so old, when I began doing flight plans, it was all on paper. And then when they issued us computers very cautiously, the Army gave us several classes. Now, are my classes in this century? No, ma'am, that all started in the 1990s. I'm comfortable with those platforms, and I couldn't tell you exactly what training I had, but the Army's very consistent in training you on every new task. And I remember sitting in computer labs at state headquarters and at Camp Blanding, being trained on different programs that were relevant to whatever we were doing in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, those basic things that you need to present here I'm very comfortable with.
If you were appointed city manager, what do you feel would be your role in the event that the city of Keystone Heights experiences a significant weather event?
Well, I actually put in a call to the county EOC last week. Colonel retired Mike Ladd, a colleague of mine from the Florida Guard, is in charge of the emergency operations. I just asked him, I said, is Keystone woefully deficient on anything? What should I be thinking about? I'm sure I'll get a question on this. And he told me, he said there's a couple of software programs, WebEx, and he mentioned a couple others that we should continually update. He was very complimentary of the current city manager, and he and I know how to communicate. We know how to speak that language. I've served in the county EOC as an elected official and as an executive. I've served in multiple EOCs around the state as an Army officer, and actually been the point person on the ground delivering water and baby food and everything everybody forgot to buy before a hurricane or a fire event. So my role in that would be to keep everybody informed, to be informed myself, to make sure I always keep, I favor everybody in my phone by what they do. So if I move forward in the city manager role, I would have the people in the EOC labeled by EOC, and I'd be able to talk to them. The cell towers go down, use radios. I've always figured out a way to communicate when I needed to communicate, and it hasn't always been easy depending on what country we were in and what the comm situation was at the time. But my role is to steward whatever relationships and resources that the city would provide. You own the right-of-ways. That's one nice thing about living in town versus living out of town. They're always well-maintained. So with the public works crew, I would be working with them. I toyed with the idea of bringing the chainsaw in and dropping it here because I watched the December 20th workshop, and I actually got it out of my shed this morning. But when I walked out, I let my older son drive my truck today, and I was wearing this white shirt, driving my wife's car, and I'm like, no, I'm just not going to do that. But I understand from both ends of this dais, there was some discussion about that, and I'm not a foreigner to briefly.
How did you handle
rewriting the multi-counter drug task forces, training facility out at Camp Blanding is located right next to the Florida Youth Challenge. I helped set both of those programs up in the early 2000s. But I wasn't in the superintendent role. I wasn't working where I had a whole lot of people. I think I had 23 or 4 guys out there at the time, and we rotated what they could do at home. We let them do at home. If anybody got exposed, we all had to drive up to Naval Air Station Jacksonville, get tested the same day. For I think 2 months, maybe like September, October, I actually did some tours in the Emergency Operations Center at the state headquarters in St. Augustine for the Florida National Guard, just because a person they had covering some skills that I had was 1 deep at that time, and they just needed some relief, needed to be able to give that officer a day or 2 off here and there. So I fit in where I'm needed. I was in conversation at the time with some of our county commissioners about using the Keystone Beach Pavilion, which got renovated with COVID money as a food storage place, and me and my sons went down there just to help load it. But again, I wasn't leading a COVID task force. I don't want to misstate anything, but I looked around for what I could do to be helpful, and was helpful in that.
Are you familiar with the Black Creek Water Project and the impact it will have on the city of Keystone?
Very, very familiar with that. Was in several conversations with anything to do about Camp Blanding and water hitting Alligator Creek, and anything that went on it in a couple of my roles out there, especially as the deputy commander of the post, as my boss and commander was in the retirement mode. I was pretty engaged in all that. He always wanted to check my notes. He didn't trust me to not route too much water out of Magnolia or Kingsley to Keystone. But other than that, you know, I got a little famous.
Oh my God, uh-oh.
So, I mean, it's all a give and take, right? But on the St. Johns River Water Management side and the legislative side, I've provided some coaching to some of those folks as we got started. Had several conversations here locally with Miss Vivian Katz about that, and I had another one last week with her about it. So I'm excited to see it come. I mean, I've lived on a lake for a lot of my life, one of them, and Geneva, Lake Keystone, and Brooklyn. So I'm glad that they are working through all that.
Have you ever managed a cemetery? If so, can you tell us a bit about it?
I have not managed a cemetery. I've been involved in a lot of burials, as both an ordained deacon at my church and burying soldiers when unfortunate incidents came upon us, but I've not ever managed a cemetery.
What do you know about smart cities and how Keystone Heights is involved?
Well, I spent some time researching smart cities. I've had some conversations with the current city manager about smart cities. I know that and some other projects are coming to you for presentation next Monday, the 8th. I'm well aware that there have been some concerns and, I don't know, accusations for maybe that's accurate, maybe that's a strong term, of people's intentions with that. From everything I understand, it's about creating safe walkways, how to maybe save on some of the utility bills. I get that. I used to budget $9 million a year for electricity for Clay County schools, 42 different campuses in the district office. So, you know, if we can figure out how to use some sensors and make street lights light up when they're being used, as opposed to having each and every street in the city limits lit all night long, that makes sense. If we can make safer walk paths, we can widen sidewalks, keep them in good repair. Those are all pieces of it. I actually watched a YouTube video on Lake Nona, south of here, that has had great success with their smart city. And I think the messaging is really key with that. When you to put out on your social media platform, say, here's what we're gonna discuss, and we're trying to do things to make it safer, more efficient, conserve energy and tax dollars that pay for it. We're not installing a bunch of cameras to track people. I mean, there could be some more eloquent wording there, but if people understand there's a conversation and understand why you're doing it, that's a good way to build trust. And I get you're not very deep in staff here. You got a manager and now a clerk and then 5 employees, a couple of which are part-time, and then some other part-time public works guys coming in and out doing various things. So, you know, you don't have Radar O'Reilly as the unit clerk 24/7 managing your Facebook page, but there has to be some attention in 2024 given to social media. And so it's like everything else in government, there's always room for improvement. So we can and should put that out there if it's something the city wants to move forward with.
City growth on a large scale is expected due to development of property on Sunrise Boulevard and the property behind Brooklyn Boys on Fox Run Road. In your opinion, what are the top 3 issues that the city will have to deal with concerning these 2 developments?
Well, I don't know that I have them rank ordered in my head, but you always have traffic flow. That'll cause more wear and tear on the roads, and you have to provide it. You have to do a lot of coordination because you don't provide, CCUA provides the water, Clay Electric provides the power, so you as the city are not providing utilities per se for those, but you need to be in communication with those who are, the developers, the people building those, need to be very clear and concise with you as they go forward. And then how does that fit into your concept if you move forward with the safe cities project you just asked me? Smart cities. And how does that impact your flow, your people that walk around town, kids walking into those housing developments to school, utilizing parks. We've had some issues with that. And I know the mayor wants to have some more conversations, involve the sheriff and I assume some of the citizens, and how we mitigate some of that risk. Kind of in that order, the actual roadways and traffic to support it, the other infrastructure in terms of utilities, and then talking with all these partners and providing safe walk paths around there, because if you have less than single-family homes, you're going to have a lot of children in there that walk. You're going to have some people in there that either don't have a car, don't have a driver's license. So the in and out and pedestrian circulation is going to be key.
Budgeting experience is a definite must for any management position. In your former position, did you independently create, manage, and maintain the budget?
With the staff, I created the budget. I managed the budget. I brought forward budgets each year. I was school superintendent to a 5-member elected body, similarly situated to you, and had 5 votes each and every budget. They made sense. I took over after a recession, so we were still in somewhat of a recovery mode from that. I say this because I used to have to use it to explain to people why we couldn't always have everything that we wanted like we used to. And the lines in blue are reoccurring revenue, and the lines in red are reoccurring expenses. And prior to me becoming superintendent, those were unbalanced for 5 years. So then when you have to put that back into balance, and your predecessor had gone through all the fund reserves, all the federal stimulus money to offset the recession, the picture, I would have loved to have had more money to spend. I didn't. So I had to figure out what were the priorities. And that's something, the Army's not perfect by any stretch on everything, but we're very consistent, and we're very good at developing developing priorities of work and going back to the number of staff that you have, i.e. that you don't have, we're gonna have to be really choosy as you define your priorities. And I will do my part if I'm selected as city manager to let you know what I think we have the capacity for and how these things could be sequenced to get most of the things you want done. I've never been in an organization yet where we got to do everything we wanted to do.
We are a small city, therefore grants are essential for funding projects. What types of experience do you have obtaining grants?
Quite a bit. I articulated some of it in my resume. For instance, Clay County school system had a lot of military dependents. Excuse me, my blood sugar thing's too far from itself. So we
You need
were
to take
able
a
to
break.
write. Sir?
You need to take a break.
Nope.
You good?
I should have had it in that pocket next to the
Oh,
little
okay.
thing. But anyway, the Department of Defense, when you have a certain student population, a certain percentage of the students in your district that have military ties, a parent works on base, somebody works for the Department of Defense as a civilian, or Department of the Navy, Department of the Army, they provide grants. So we went after that pretty ferociously during those lean budget years. And you can write grants for all kinds of things. We wrote them for training math teachers. We wrote them for training science teachers. We wrote them to get greater resources in general. And billing is important. When you got 37,000 students and some of them are eligible for Medicaid and Social Security disability and things like that, you just have to look at what are your possible sources. Honestly evaluate, talk with the citizens about who's eligible for what, and then provide those. So we managed a lot of grants. I've been through a lot of audits, both financial and academic. Got a high comfort factor with those and have never had any significant findings either in my civilian career or military career when audited.
What background or knowledge do you have about community redevelopment areas, also known as CRAs?
We worked through those, and you have to as a county. I've not obviously worked through them as a city, but if I was involved in either the city of Keystone Heights, city of Green Cove, city of Orange Park as a county elected official, we worked through the entire CRA process to figure out what of our projects that we wanted to do that we could do. You have to have input from each of those stakeholders, municipalities, other county agencies. And so as Keystone Heights, the greatest thing we have is our colleagues. If you want to think of us as a family relationship with the rest of the county, we're a first or second cousin. So we have to look at things like any CRA development and look at who else is involved and try to come up with things that provide some benefit to everybody involved so that you can get your initiative through.
Can you please describe your experience with local utility finances?
Local utility finances? I'm not clear on what you're asking me there.
I apologize, I did not.
Whoever
Whose question was it?
wrote the question,
I
wanted
did. It wasn't mine.
Wasn't mine.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, I worked with Clay Electric on a number of things through the years. I don't know what you're asking.
I do not know either what that's.
Just move on. We'll just move on to the next question.
idea.
We just won't grade on it.
Yeah.
Good idea.
We'll just ignore it.
All right. Keystone Heights is going to have a centennial celebration. What experience do you have in planning large events?
Well, currently I'm the executive director and chairperson of the Keystone Heights Centennial Committee. We turn 100 next year, if anybody didn't know that. I planned a lot of large events for a lot of different people to the tunes of hundreds of people, thousands of people, hosted events in Green Cove and the county seat. We've hosted events at the Thrasher Horn Center for Teacher of the Year and Support Employee of the Year. I mean, and that's music and food and everybody getting dressed up. We're invited in professional photography. When we opened the Florida Youth Challenge Academy at Camp Landing, it was supposed to open mid-September of 2001. If you remember, our nation was attacked on the 11th, so we had to revise the entire thing to get the governor in, and then it was determined the governor was not going to travel to that, so we flew the lieutenant governor into Keystone Airport. That involved a lot of security. I had to have a secure airfield, but there was no definition of security. So we secured the airfield. I won't go into detail on how, and landed a couple of helicopters and picked up the lieutenant governor and his entourage, brought them onto Camp Landing. That event probably had 300 or 400 people alone. I will lean, if given this position, heavily on the staff and on volunteers. I'm good at putting together volunteer armies. In fact, analyzing the amount of staff that's here, events like the 4th of July, we used to do big parades and festivals in the park on Labor Day. I haven't seen one of those in several years. But whatever the city wants to either vote to do or partner with other civic organizations to put on, I think I would be comfortable with the scope of anything I've seen in Keystone to date.
Do you have any relationships or friendships with current employees or elected officials of the city, Camp Landing, local business leaders, Clay County City public officials, and representatives of St. John's, Florida District? If so, please elaborate. I will be glad to repeat that if I need to.
Just a summary?
Keep it down to 20 minutes, Joe.
I can't name any of the entities that you just named where I wouldn't know somebody, or several somebodies. As far as I know, I have good relationships with people in all of those positions. I know the council members here to varying degrees. Some of you have been in my home before to talk about various things. The county commissioners, I know all of them. I know many of the county staff. The guys at Camp Landing are getting younger and younger all the time, so I know less and less of them all the time. I know the guys in the corner offices, but most of my crew was, somewhere in your late 40s, early 50s. It's probably about time to retire after you've done 30-something years. So less of those every day. St. Johns River Water Management District, one of my old bosses, General Burnett, is still on that, I believe, and I believe former Senator Bradley, their law partner, still on that?
Yep.
Yeah, so I haven't been to one of those meetings in several months, but I pay attention to what's going on, and I'm not opposed. And if I was in a position like this, I would feel it necessary to go be involved in some of those meetings or send a representative, and I will make the rounds with all those aforementioned people if selected for this, so that they know what I'm doing and we're in a position to be of mutual aid to each other when the needs arise. And they do arise. They arise all the time.
This is a scenario. You are asked to do something unlawful, unethical, or against the city regulations by a city council member. What would your response be, and how would you move forward?
Well, that's a non-starter. Anybody that's ever worked for me or around me, to include the 160 administrators that were in Clay County when I left the office of superintendent, always knew that I would underwrite an honest mistake. But if you fail morally, legally, or ethically, you have to go. I will fire you. Now, if it's a city council member, I cannot fire you, but I can't imagine any of you have anything nefarious in mind. But that I would not be the guy if you did.
The Florida League of Cities has bronze, silver, and gold level certificates for city managers. Tell us what you know about these certificates,
Florida League of Cities and the Florida City and County Managers Association. They have a plethora of certificates. I did not memorize what you have to do to get a gold, silver, or bronze. My personality would be towards getting the platinum certificate, whatever that looks like. When I was school superintendent, I trained and wrote papers and got both levels of superintendent certification. I believe in professional organizations. I've always been members of the Florida School Board Association, Florida School District Superintendents Association, Military Officers Association of America, MOAA, AOPA, and Pilots Association, Quad A for Army Aviation, all those things. But to your specific question, I could not articulate the differences between those three certificates. My plan, and given some thought to this, if offered this position, would be to call a few of the city managers in similar situations with like-sized budgets and constituent groups and ask which ones of those courses help the most first and start there and keep moving. But I'll make a commitment to you to be involved in those and to get whatever certifications necessary to learn the nuances of city government. I realize it's not county government, and so this would be a new experience if we did move forward.
Would you, as a condition of employment, participate in some type of education or training that would directly assist you in the duties while in the position of city manager, such as one offered by the Florida City and County Management Association, known as FCCMA?
Absolutely. I would welcome that. I would think it would be an expectation and a desire of this council for whoever their new city manager is to receive that kind of training and become certified.
How would you handle conflict with the public? Also, how would you handle conflicts with employees, if any are to arise?
Well, with the public, I alluded to this earlier, you have to listen. As a military commander and as a school superintendent, school board member, I always have maintained an open door policy. I'll sit down and talk with anybody. Usually, talking with somebody instead of about somebody solves a lot more. Ronald Reagan had a quote like that: if we talk more to people instead of about people, we get a lot more done. I'm a big believer in that. So you cannot please everybody. There won't be enough resources, hours in the day, and dollars in the account to make every citizen perfectly happy, but they all deserve to be heard. What you do on this dais affects not just the 1,500 or so citizens of Keystone Heights. It goes well beyond that. You have a community impact, community-wide impact. So you asked about the citizen conflict and with who?
Employees.
Employees. Well, everybody that would be employed and would answer to me if I become the city manager would have very clear expectations set. And as long as they operate within the four corners of that page, there are no problems. If we need a variance, I'm always open to sitting down and talking about what variance they might need to go get their kids out of school or take an elderly parent to the doctor. Or I've not had big issues with those, with thousands of employees, literally. So I would hope that quickly I would be able to build relationships with a half a dozen or so people and the other part-time employees here to mitigate that. But if I did, we would just work through it. And as long as they're not doing something immoral, illegal, or unethical, I'm not opposed to giving them further training or some latitude to meet their families' needs and do their duty. I will say this: we've got to do something. I'm not a city resident any longer, but I pop in here and rarely see the same people at those front desks. So this, I don't know why, but this workforce needs some stability. So I will do the things I know how to do to we've been planning for a year, so we'll go ahead and tell you a little bit about the security on the Keystone Airfield. We'll include the Lieutenant Governor in 2001, shortly after 9/11. Nobody anticipated 9/11, right? And that had bearings on public officials' travel, on going in and out of airports, both civil airfields like the one we have here and major passenger hubs. So to be able to bring in the Lieutenant Governor to the Keystone Heights Airport, it had to be secure. And back then, the airport didn't have the kind of facilities that it has today. And I served on the Air Park Authority 2001-ish to 2003 or 4. And we used to come and sit right where you're sitting right now and talk through things on the airfield. But we had a gentleman that was a Vietnam vet, owned the True Value, Bob Kennedy, most of you probably knew him, that was chairman of the Air Park Board. So I went to him, I said, Mr. Bob, I said, I need to put some Special Forces soldiers all over the Keystone Airport. And I told him whatever morning this was going to be, I said, I built you a comms box with a uniform Victor and FM radio so you can talk to anything flying in and out. My guys will provide you one of their walkie-talkies so you can talk with them. And so if somebody's coming in to pre-flight their Piper Cub or Cessna 172 and take off, no problem. We're not trying to quell what's going on at the airport, but we're right next to Camp Landing, and so we have to have this level of security. So when you do things like that, you bring it down to the very fewest number of people that can know and actually execute the objectives given to you by the governor's office, your commanders, etc. So I worked with guys from the 3rd of the 20th Special Forces Battalion on Blanding that I knew under direction of their senior commander, and we just adapted. There's this old saying, adapt and overcome. My wife throws it back at me all the time if I sit there and complain about anything because she's had to adapt and overcome many times through the years. So you just adapt. Whatever the situation is, it might not be something that drastic. It might just be that you've got a VIP coming in here to visit, and it turns out that a couple of your people are going to be off that day, and now you need to offer them some comp time or make some other arrangements and have them here and have all hands on deck at that time, and afford them some time off at a time when it's not going to be as busy or as critical.
Planning for a city is a daily duty for the city manager. How would you prioritize city planners?
Well, the first thing is to clearly understand what this city council wants done. You have several things coming to you in your next meeting in 5 days from now. And if I'm seated here as the incoming city manager with the outgoing city manager, I'll be taking copious notes of where you want to go. The very next thing I would do was set up a time to meet with each of you individually and see where you really want to go so I can start building a bigger picture of what your vision is of the city. The big difference, I guess, for me in this role versus being an elected executive with a 5-member legislative body is I'm the moon. I have no energy on my own. You're the sun. As you illuminate and speak to me with energy on what you want to see happen, it's then incumbent upon me to plan, prioritize. First priority of work is always security, right? We have to be able to do it in a safe manner, but then we have to go through and look at the resources, look at timetables, see if that meets your intent, and if it doesn't, then I'll come back to you and say, well, here are some plausible ways to adjust this plan in terms of resources or time to still capture what it is that you want to do. But first thing in the city of Keystone Heights always has to be safety. We're not in charge of public safety, but we all have voices. We have ways to communicate with those that can assist us in keeping safe. If we have activities that systemically create an unsafe situation, then we have to mitigate that risk. So I'm comfortable doing any and all of that. As far as what you want to do specifically, line by line, we're going to need to work together to put all that in a basket. And you either tell me priorities 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or tell me to suggest to you which ones can be done first, and come back and present you a flow. But that's something we have to have a lot more conversation for me to be able to rattle your priorities off back to you. But so far, just in watching the past several months, what you've been doing, I don't have great cause with anything that I've heard. If I did, I would not be sitting here before you today.
How savvy are you with information technology?
Not the greatest. Like, I should have known to have my cell phone in the other pocket that wasn't very far away from my blood sugar sensor, right? Now, I say that tongue in cheek. I can sit in the most advanced attack helicopter in the world, and with the checklist started up, it probably would be slower than I did the last time I did it. So I'm not foreign to technology. I used to use this term called digital natives. My children are digital natives. They can't remember a time when there wasn't a cell phone, when there wasn't a computer. They order auto parts for their trucks to jack them up and level them and do all these things online. I go see my friend Clint down at the auto parts store. You know, so it's a different approach. Am I against it? No. Have I had instances where I carried several radios and several cell phones? Yes. Can I shoot, move, and communicate? That was a term we used to always use as an Apache front seater. Yes. I would hope at this stage in life, we have some IT support. I assume the city uses the same as the airport does. This would be different for me not having an IT person on station. And I was able to print and bind my own stuff, but you see, still I prefer the paper. So, I don't know if that adequately answered it.
Are you active on any various, or are you active on social media?
Not tremendously. You'll see me post something about my son graduating from rookie school at the fire academy, or my other son weightlifting or playing football. I'm familiar with it. I don't know who half the people I'm friends with Facebook on are. But it is a part of the fabric of our society. I'm not opposed to using it for the good of the city.
Can you please describe any experience you have had with public communication and negative social media?
Talk to the public in my previous career all the time. You're sending home letters and phone calls, robocalls. When I became the superintendent of Clay County Schools, there was a website that wasn't well put together. No social media, not a Facebook account, not a Twitter account. And I was sitting there with my wife at not Twin Lakes Park, Little Rain Lake Park one night, watching our older boy when he was in elementary school, looking at all the parents who were all younger than us, by the way, and they're all on their phones. And I'm like, if we're sending letters home, these 26, 28, 32-year-old parents, they aren't reading those. We got to come to them, get into their news feed. So then I worked through all that and used some people that like IT and were very savvy at IT to create those things. And if we experienced rumblings through social media about things that parents, citizens weren't happy with, then we began to communicate and try to mitigate those things. I've watched your meetings and heard you express to people, hey, you're always welcome to call me or come to a meeting and fill out a card and speak for 3 minutes. So it is some of those same things, but if I could emphasize this as an area I've given some thought to in light of the city's current situation moving forward with smart cities and listening to some of the city council's discussion about social media, I think it'll be important to let people know as often as you can what you're thinking about and discussing. If no decision's been made, if there's not even been a drawing for the new city hall, there's not been a concept for digging out the tennis court and bringing in proper fill dirt and compacting it to the point where it won't crack again if you just pour off the asphalt surface and resurfaced it. All those things need to be said as succinctly as possible, with the knowledge you're still not going to make everybody happy, but you can and should communicate. So I'll be shepherding that process if given the opportunity, and that would be my approach to it. And I'm always open to adjustments to an approach to make it better. I'm never insulted by collaborative thoughts and thought partners and better ideas on something.
Your government experience is vast in the military and Clay County roles. The role of a city manager would be a new experience for you. Can you please describe your perception of a day in the life of a city of Keystone Heights city manager with regard to multitasking, community challenges, and leadership?
So, yes, I'd be happy to. I've pondered this, and it is a much smaller budget. It's a much smaller staff. I'm going to need to take a couple of notes. What were the 3 specific things you wanted?
Multitasking, community challenges, and leadership.
Okay. Leadership, I have a master's degree literally in organizational leadership. I've tracked through every leadership school that the Army has up to War College, and then when we all found out I was a type 2 diabetic and I didn't get promoted to full colonel and I did not get to go to War College, that was kind of a hard stop. But I'm very comfortable leading. My leadership style is servant leadership. I've studied that, written about it, given professional development to civilians in Clay County and military officers and non-commissioned officers in how to provide servant leadership. The focus is never on me. I don't have a big wound-up ego. It doesn't need to be stroked. People need to be served. People need some help. So I provide leadership in a way that's maybe a little kinder or gentler. A lot of people have seen a John Wayne movie or a Clint Eastwood movie where they're portraying somebody in the military and all, they think, oh, everybody in the military is, just bare-knuckled and hard. Well, I can be. I've operated in combat zones successfully, but that's not my nature. My nature is to go find the people that could really do well if they had just a little bit of a boost and lead them in that direction. And that's the way I would hope to lead the staff at City Hall. Community challenges, just as you've experienced in your varying lengths of community service and elected service, people are always concerned with what you're doing and often feel free to give opinions about what you're doing without really understanding what you're doing. So the shelter of that keyboard in the comfort of my lazy boy, that's a lot easier than sitting out here and looking 5 people in the eye and expressing a thought and then having to admit they didn't fully understand what was going on. So never haughty, never puffed up with the public, but listen, seek to understand, and then seek to meet them where they are and mitigate the issues they have. And government is not the solution for everything. It cannot be. With 6 people and $1 billion annual budget, you cannot fix everybody's woes. But you can meet some of them, and you should strive to meet some of them, and that all goes back to your priorities we were talking about. Once those are clearly set, and somebody comes in, I would be able to give them a good idea of how we may be able to help them, and maybe the city can't help them. Maybe it's Answers Resource Center, maybe it's the Lake Area Food Bank, the Lake Area Ministries, maybe it's the Veterans Counselor in Clay County. There are other resources that we're linked to in the community and in government, but necessarily responsible for, and we don't pull all the levers on all these things. So I think that was leadership and community. Multitasking, I've had to do my entire life. The fact that some people can't safely drive down the road and talk on their cell phone, if you can't do both of those things, you should not have a driver's license. You know, as a very young man, I was required to transmit and receive on 5 radios, navigate, and fly. Most of the time with a co-pilot, but not always. You know, so multitasking is second nature to me. I've always had to do it. My first 2 Middle East deployments, I was elected to the school board and serving, and when mission permitted, I kept up with my civil duties. And I had spoken with the governors at the time to make sure that was okay. And federal law changed somewhere around 06, 07. The JAG contacted me and said, you need to take a leave of absence for the rest of this deployment. I know what the governor told you, I know what the general told you, but now they're instructing me to tell you this. So I was like, yes, ma'am, 3 bags full. You know, so you adjust. But multitasking is, here, it may look like a really long meeting, and then 3 days later, our hurricane might be bearing down, and you might be in the EOC getting morning updates or update via Zoom or Skype or some other means, and then communicating back with the citizens of Keystone Heights and the city council as to what we have, what we don't have, what we'll be able to provide when City Hall is going to close. If I have to go wake Mr. Brown up and, you know, get our chainsaws in the back of my 4-wheel drive and go drag stuff out of the right of way so people can pull out of the driveway the next morning, then we'll do some of that. But we will mitigate all those risks. We will not do it in the middle of a storm. I used to work for a general that he said the first thing I want the citizens of Florida to see when they come out of shelter from a hurricane is a Florida National Guardsman. But that didn't mean we chained ourselves to trees and waited for it to pass. Okay, we assess hazards, then we identify them, then we mitigate the risk, then we safely, with priority and purpose, execute whatever is coming across the plate that day.
Can you please describe any experiences you have had with project management and key deliverables?
Gosh. So every mission in life has an end and a transition. Every mission has a beginning. So during, do you have you want a military one, a school board one, what do you have a flavor?
I kind of like the military.
Okay, so
Whatever you got.
25 years ago, Lieutenant Van Zant and his first command is flying Operation Southern Watch. Saddam Hussein still very much large and in charge with T-55 tanks. So we were flying with Apache helicopters the southern border of Iraq along the Kuwaiti border, and another task force had the northern border mission. And some gentlemen, it was a Florida, North Carolina, Alabama combined task force. You talk about country come to town, country, that was us. And some of those guys smuggled in some alcohol. You can take anything into a foreign country. You can't always get it back out through customs. And then some of them were getting fruit out of the mess hall and making alcoholic drinks. So nonetheless, Operation Desert Fox commenced. There was a little bit of shooting going on. And then it had all calmed down by New Year's Eve, and I had one of the general's sons, who was one of my sergeants, guarding the Fort Army aerial refueling point. He came up and let me know a bunch of soldiers got arrested by military police and security police from different services in different countries, and had to sort through. Thankfully, none of my Florida National Guard soldiers were arrested. And then a couple of weeks later, the commander, the task force commander, who was from North Carolina, said, we thought we were just going home in late February, early March, and it it would be too hot, was the Army's thought, for nuclear weapons play during the summer, and we would just leave, take all our equipment home with us, and a new task force would come in the next September. Well, all that plan got scrambled, and they said, all right, we're leaving 30 guys back. Lieutenant Van Zant's the rear detachment commander. You'll sign over all the aircraft, the tools, the weapons to attack battalion at the 82nd Airborne that'll be coming. I said, what? You know, but all of a sudden now I have to decide, figure out what all we have left, what all in terms of supplies, machinery, repair parts, weapons, ammunition, which we had inventory, but then work through with people I had never met a timeline that they would start showing up, and we would start handing off parts of the mission, start giving them orientation flights. And then how I would actually get our guys. There wasn't a ton of cop space, tent space there to be had. We're all living in the dirt, right? So as we go down the things that have to happen for that transition, and I think I came home on like March 18th or 19th, then we had to work through that. And oh, by the way, the 30 guys that got some kind of Uniform Code of Military Justice action, about 25 of the 30 they left with me were guys that were like the sweat hogs off Welcome Back Kotter, to use a sitcom reference. That was the crew they left me back with. Most of my Florida guys got to go home with a bunch of the knuckleheads from 2 other states. But all along, you're daily going over the list of deliverables with all your guys. If something starts to go sideways, one of my infamous lines is, bad news does not get better with age. If you, the council, direct me as the city manager to start accomplishing something, and other pieces, whether it's my mistake, a staff member's mistake, the ball got dropped, another agency was going to do something, I will inform you as soon as I know it, and you all get the same information at roughly the same time so that we can adjust. Each year, school has to start, right? 17,000 kids rode buses. They had to have a way to get to school. We fed thousands of them breakfast and even more of them lunch. All those things had to be ordered, they had to be budgeted for, staff had to be allocated, funded. I mean, I've lived off checklists and timelines for decades. I'm very comfortable with that.
Can you share any negotiation situations from previous roles and how you played a key role with communications and follow-up?
Yes, ma'am. So just as dealing with this 5-member council, as a school superintendent, I had 2 labor unions to negotiate contracts with annually, one for all the instructional people and one for all the support folks, bus drivers, secretaries, custodians. That's one of the few times in Florida that you can vary from the sunshine law. So you can meet in the shade with your legislative body and discuss what they're wanting to offer those labor unions in terms of a step increase for salary, or an increase to the base salary, or added benefits for them, for health, for life, for dental, for family. And so you get the best picture you can from your legislative body. And then I would appoint several negotiation team members for management for the school district that were administrators, because they are not in either of the unions. And I was the chief negotiator by position, although I did not attend each bargaining session. So I would have people there from transportation, from facilities, from maintenance, all at that bargaining table with the support people that had those different skills. We employed carpenters, plumbers, electricians, welders, you name it, to maintain 42 campuses, and I can't even remember how many buildings, thousands of them literally. And it's kind of the same on Camp Landing. We had federal civil service technicians working that were unionized and had negotiations and had rights to grievances and things like that. So again, I had the Department of Public Works and So I've done a lot of negotiating. If you negotiate well, nobody gets exactly what they asked for. I've done it in years where we had money and were able to offer salary increases and raises and better benefits. I've done it in years where there wasn't much to offer and generally nobody's happy. You don't want to not take care, the best care you can of your staff here in the city, but you're limited by the budget you guys produce. That's life everywhere. I will say this, I did meet with Ms. Rebecca Williams, a CPA here in town that does your monthly financial reviews, and went over the budget with her, and I said, am I missing something here? They have 70% of their annual operating budget roughly in reserves. That's very, very large for a governmental entity to have. She didn't have any great concerns. She reminded me of back when Mr. Gates was on the council and you guys were heading into the recession in '08 and the emphasis on reserves. So that makes sense. But if I could give you any comfort level, I've done a lot of negotiating. I've led a lot of those teams. And I'll just have to know the specifics of where you want to end up to start. One of my deputy superintendents used to refer to it as dance steps. You just need the first 2 dance steps. We're going to negotiate, come back, and give us the next 2. They don't want all of it at once. You can't, it sounds shady, but literally that is the term under Florida law. You get the meat in the shade, and then nobody wants to show all the cards all at once.
Please compare and contrast your duties as superintendent of schools with those of Keystone Heights city manager.
Oh my gosh. I think this job will be much more succinct, much more well-defined. Just in reading the charter and looking at the maps of the city, I'm very familiar with your boundaries, so there's just a lot less geography to keep up with. We're not responsible for feeding people every day. We're not responsible for transporting every day. We're not responsible for public safety in terms of police or fire. So it is it's a large electronic Rolodex to keep up with, to serve the city, but the scope of this job would probably be to a much lesser degree than comparing it to the superintendent. I mean, we have roughly 1,500 residents. I used to have about 5,000 people that just work for the school. And so it is a similar role in that I would be working with the legislative body as the executive arm with the staff, but it would just be a lot less. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easier. I think in some ways it'll be more difficult because everybody wants to be able to do things, and there's less people to actually execute those priorities. So we're going to have to be very diligent and thoughtful with the priorities that you set forth, and then realistic about how many of those can be accomplished at one time.
Mr. Van Zandt, now that you have been thoroughly questioned, do you have any questions for the council?
4 o'clock. So, I'm always at my best when I'm doing multiple things. I'm not sitting here before you today because I'm not financially prepared to be retired. I choose to not be fully retired, if that makes sense. So I did ask Ms. Fratowski about the pay period. You have one that ends this Wednesday. And if you want to move forward and you're confident in my ability to be your city manager, I would work it out with whoever I'm entering that negotiation with. I wouldn't want to be paid for the first 2 or 3 pay periods. Instead, I would just like some comp time. You can write in the contract, I don't want to be paid for it, but I just don't want to be crushed time-wise in my son's last half of his senior year of high school. If I need to take an afternoon and go to a weightlifting meet in Interlochen or up in Orange Park or over in Suwannee County, and watch him lift a whole bunch of weight, then I just need to be able to do that. I have an 80-year-old father and a 75-year-old mother-in-law that lives in a cottage on our property. I've got a line friend that's a neighbor of yours that I have to take to the VA sometimes. Thankfully, I don't have to go to the VA for me but once a year. But he needs a little help, so I need to be able to do that. Doesn't mean I'm out of communication. It doesn't mean I can't talk on the phone. It doesn't mean I won't take a laptop with me and be prepared to do things. But I just need to know that I have some ability. There's a couple of school board members, a couple of superintendents across the state that I'm a thought partner with, for lack of a better term, and help coach. It's never been more difficult to run a school system than it is right now in Florida. Tons and tons of challenges. I have an LLC. I haven't made any money at it in a long time, but if I ever found something that was willing to allow me to consult and pay me a little bit of money, I'm not against that idea. I've used it to feed my family in between jobs from time to time through the years. So not really a question, just trying to lay my cards on the table with you guys. I feel fully comfortable with assuming the roles based on the budget I've seen, based on the charter and ordinances. I actually was on your charter review committee this last time around until I moved out of the city limits in May of '02 and then resigned from it. So I don't have a lot of questions for you, just wanted to share with you my perspective. I don't need a healthcare plan per se. I don't need Blue Cross, Blue Shield, or Aetna, or whatever you guys use to insure your employees. What I would ask you to consider is you've had me compare the kind of scope of work I've done and what this scope would be. I watched you interview and discuss your city clerk and hire and put them on a pay scale. I would think that I would be somewhere towards the middle or top of your experience and salary range, maybe not. For me to be insured by your plan would take, I don't know, somebody would have to tell me what that would take. But I would consider having that as part of salary versus part of a benefit. I'm blessed in that I have good health and I don't need you to have to pay for an extra health insurance policy. Maybe we can split the difference or something.
You guys have any other questions?
No, I don't.
Dan?
I'm good.
You're good?
Can I just ask one more point of clarification? Sure. So in reading the charter and just knowing what I know about government, and to just manage expectations, when we would leave a city council meeting, and you guys decide and give me direction, I would then take and go and execute that. I would not expect one of you individually to call me and say, well, we know we said that the other night, but here's really what I want you to do.
That would be totally out of bounds.
It should not.
Well, I never mention anything unless it's happened to me before.
Well,
That's not anything on you or what I would expect. That would be my
Yeah, we wouldn't do that.
expectation. And if you have different ones, then I just, again, want to be upfront with you.
Yeah.
Anything else at all for me?
I don't
Well,
think
I've
so.
enjoyed it.
Thank you so much
Thanks,
for being here
Charlotte.
today, and we appreciate you sharing all of this information with us.
Okay.
And we will keep you posted.
Okay. Should I expect a call today, tomorrow, or?
We're going to butt heads in a few minutes.
Okay,
You
well,
should
I'm
get
out of the room so you can talk about it.
He'll know something. He'll probably know something.
We'll tell you something today.
We'll tell you something today.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to talk, so unless you have another meeting.
That will be our plan. Yep.
No.
Thank you so much, Charlie.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Take
Charlie.
care.
I need to step up first.
You want to stretch? Take 5?